Good morning, everybody. This is the Sunday School lesson for Grace Baptist Church for August 23rd, 2020. Before I go into today's lesson, let's pray. And Father in heaven, I ask that you be with us. I ask that you keep everybody safe. This is, I can smell the smoke from where I sit. Fires are bad. And Lord, I know fires are a natural process, and I know many things are natural processes, but we're making them worse. Lord, help us to be kind to each other, help us to be kind to your planet, and help your planet to be kind to us, and help us to be kind to each other. I ask this in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. So I'm titling today's lesson, I'm continuing on Joseph the dreamer being a loser. You're probably familiar with the story of Joseph already. The whole story reads kind of like a fairy tale. It's a good boy against all odds, and with divine intervention, overcomes all antagonists, and everybody is happy in the end, except for maybe the bad guys. Today we look at one of the middle chapters of this story. In our lives, we, through no fault of our own, sometimes end up as losers. We live in a culture that values winners. Some of what passes as entertainment is all about winners, and losers just get left out. My disagreement with anything that values only victors is that all victors have been non-victors in the past. Before Joseph the dreamer became a man who changed the world, he was a loser. We've watched him lose twice now, and now he's losing again. He was nothing and less than nothing several times. And the reason I think this is important because we face this in our own lives. We lose everything, and then we lose everything, and then we lose everything again. And God still expects us to make wonderful things out of this world with it. So there we have it. Before the time of today's lesson, Joseph had been progressed from his era's version of a spoiled rich kid, I mean we're talking about 2000 BC here or so, to becoming a slave laborer, and then an administrative assistant to an African country's chief military officer, and then to getting jailed with political prisoners, and then to becoming a prison trustee. And now, he's still a loser, but he's a loser with responsibilities because he's a prison trustee. The lectionary readings for today, by the way, are Exodus 1, 8, 12 through 10. So the lectionary has already gone past Joseph to the Exodus. Psalm 138, Psalm 124, Isaiah 51, 1 through 6, Matthew 16, 13 through 20, and Romans 12, 1 through 8. But we're going to go back to the story of Joseph because I want to slog through it. Here we are, Joseph 40. And it came to pass after these things that the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker had offended their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was wroth against two of his officers, against the chief of the butlers, and against the chief of the bakers. And he put them in ward, in the house of the captain of the guard, into the prison, the place where Joseph was bound. And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them. And they continued a season in the ward. And they dreamed a dream, both of them, each man his dream in one night, each man according to the interpretation of his dream, the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, which were bound in the prison. And Joseph came in unto them in the morning, and looked upon them, and behold, they were sad. And he asked Pharaoh's officers that were with him in the ward of his lord's house, saying, Wherefore look ye so sadly today? And they said unto him, We have dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter of it. And Joseph said unto them, Do not interpretations belong to the Lord? Tell me them, I pray you. I want to just take a note. It looks to me like the butler and the baker thought that they were dreaming the same dream because they kind of sound alike, but they're not. And the chief butler told his dream to Joseph and said to him, did I already say this? And he said to them, we have dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter of it. And Joseph said unto them, do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me them, I pray you. And the chief butler told his dream to Joseph, and said to him, in my dream, behold, a vine was before me. And in the vine there were 3 branches, and it was as though it budded, and her blossoms shot forth, and the clusters thereof brought forth ripe grapes. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. And Joseph said unto him, this is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thine head, and restore thee unto thy place. And thou shalt deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand, after the former manner when thou wast his butler. But think on me when it shall be well with thee, and show kindness, I pray thee, unto me, and make mention of me unto Pharaoh, and bring me out of this house. For indeed I was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also have I done nothing that they should put me into the dungeon. When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said unto Joseph, I also was in my dream, and behold, I had 3 white baskets on my head. And in the uppermost basket there was of all manner of baked meats for Pharaoh, and the birds did eat them out of the basket upon my head. And Joseph answered and said, this is the interpretation thereof. The 3 baskets are 3 days. And I bet you the baker thought, well, good, this sounds good. And then Joseph said, yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thy head from off thee, and shall hang thee upon a tree, and the birds shall eat thy flesh from off thee. And it came to pass the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast unto all his servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief butler and the chief baker among his servants. And he restored the chief butler unto his butlership again, and gave the cup unto Pharaoh's hand. And he hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph, but forgot him. So, today's portion of the story begins at court. 2 high-ranking officials go to prison. We don't know what they did, but the Pharaoh was an absolute ruler. All they needed to do was look at the ruler sideways, and there they were in prison. The chief butler and the chief baker went to jail, and Joseph, who saw to their needs, got to know them. They were there for a little while. One night they had dreams, very strong dreams. The people of those cultures believed in dreams. That's how God spoke to them. That's how Spirit spoke to them, is through dreams. And they woke up feeling strongly about them, and they told these dreams to each other, but they could not decide if the dreams meant anything or what they meant if they did. Joseph, their trustee, came along. He was going to feed them breakfast or whatever it was. He came along and convinced him to tell them her dreams. Now, I've started to read some how-tos on dream interpretation, and I couldn't progress very far. You know, the methods of everything I've read seems really complex. If it's this, it means this. If it's that, it means that. And blah, 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 blah. You've got to take this rule, and 6 means this. And if you're a birth, means someone's going to die. And if it's someone's dying, that means someone's being born. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, too silly for me, or too complicated. The methods seem a bit complex and arbitrary. Dreaming was important in several cultures involved in the creation of the Bible, involved in in how the Bible was made. It's kind of fallen in favor now. However, if people don't dream much now, they will. Here's what Joel 12:28 says, "And it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, your old men shall dream dreams, and your young men shall see visions." Okay. Joseph explains his ability to interpret dreams as simply coming from God. Simple. The interpretation is God's. Joseph just accesses it. What's he say? "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me the dreams." So, the chief butler related his dream. "And in my dream, behold, a vine was before me, and in the vine there were 3 branches. And it was as though it budded, and her blossoms shot forth, and the clusters thereof brought forth ripe grapes. And Pharaoh's cup was there in my hand, and I just took the grapes, and I squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I just gave the cup to Pharaoh." Joseph's interpretation was favorable to him. Pharaoh would remember the chief butler. The chief butler would get his old job back, and it would be as if he had never been in prison. Joseph said to them, "This is an interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thine head. He will restore you to your old place, and you shall deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand, just like it was before when you were his butler." Joseph does ask a favor, though. "Remember me," he says, "when I get an idea." And we get an idea of how Joseph feels about his situation. "Indeed," he says, "I was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also have I done nothing that they should put me into the dungeon." The chief baker likes the chief butler's forecast. That sounds pretty good, he says, and he can't wait to tell Joseph his dream. "I also was in my dream, and behold, I had 3 baskets on my head. And in the uppermost basket there was all manner of baked meats for Pharaoh. And the birds did eat them out of the basket upon my head." Well, Joseph, his interpretation is pretty grim for the butler. Pharaoh, for the baker, that is. Pharaoh would remember the chief baker, and the chief baker was going to die. Well, the 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head from off you, and he shall hang you on a tree, and the birds are going to eat your flesh. Well, that pretty much ends the story for the chief baker. He was executed in 3 days, and the chief butler was reinstated to his old position. The chief butler forgot all about Joseph, who languished for 2 more years in prison, and we're going to hear what happens about that next week, or you can read it in the Bible, and you won't need to come back for my lesson. The story of Joseph happened a couple of 100 years, one way or another, of 4,000 years ago. This is probably before the Hyksos ruled Egypt. It was called like the intermediary period or something. The upper and lower kingdoms of Egypt were probably not united. There had been an ongoing Egyptian identity for more than 1,000 years already, but the kingdom of Egypt was split. It was probably at that time an upper kingdom and a lower kingdom. And so Egypt's in a dark ages. The country is embattled by wars. Our hero is in prison. He's forgotten by anybody he had ever considered important. And that's the way we end it. So the reason I'm stopping there is because for the 3rd time I want to make the point that sometimes it looks like life really, really, really sucks. But God's still working with you. Joseph was in prison. Joseph had been forgotten by everybody who knew him. and God was still remembering him. God remembered Joseph in prison. And God didn't leave Joseph in prison. And there are people who end their lives in prison, but God, we know, is a God of all people. And one of the reasons we have to remember prisoners and the people that are sick is because Jesus says that those are him. You know, when he's Matthew 25 at the great white throne judgment, he says, you don't go to those people, you don't go to me. I am those people. So we've got to remember that. And if we're one of those people, this is kind of fun. Remember that Jesus considers you part of himself. So that's kind of mystical, and I'm not sure where to go with that, so I'm going to end the lesson now. Everybody have a good week, and you take care.